We begin with the coronavirus situation here in Japan. Tokyo and 3 neighboring prefectures remain under a state of emergency in an effort to lower the number of new infections. But recent data show the rate of decline is stalling. Combined, Tokyo, Chiba, Kanagawa, and Saitama reported nearly 600 cases on Tuesday, accounting for about half of the nation's total tally. And the average daily tally in Tokyo for the past week has hovered around 260, practically the same as the week before.
The number of new cases has stopped declining. We must do whatever we can to contain the spread of infection and prevent a rebound in cases.
One of the strategies is testing 50,000 people at 1,500 elderly care facilities. Officials are also looking at ways to identify infection clusters in entertainment districts earlier. Meanwhile, the nation's rollout of the Pfizer vaccine is continuing. Over 70,000 healthcare workers have received the jab so far. Each vial contains 5 to 6 doses depending on the syringe. But a hospital in Kyoto has found a way to extract 7 doses by using a syringe typically used to inject diabetic patients with insulin.
The needle was thin and the syringe was small. The shot didn't hurt as much as I expected.
Since the needle is shorter, it can only be used for people with a thin layer of fat under the skin. The hospital conducts an ultrasound to ensure it'll be effective. Out of 259 people, 85% were injected using the smaller needle on Monday. And the minister overseeing vaccination efforts is encouraging the approach.
We are trying to find out if there are any excess supplies and whether we can procure the syringes.
But experts doubt the insulin syringe will become the standard because an ultrasound test is required. Now, a medical equipment manufacturer has also produced a syringe that can extract 7 doses. It expects to make about 20 million of them over the next year. Sources tell NHK the torch relay for the Tokyo Olympics will be kicking off without spectators due to the pandemic. The start event will take place at the J-Village Soccer Center in Fukushima Prefecture on March 25th. From there, the torch will travel across all 47 of Japan's prefectures in 121 days. The sources say the decision was prompted by the need to avoid crowds. Spectators will be allowed for the rest of the relay. A series of measures have been decided on, such as no shouting and only clapping. The organizers plan to decide on other details as they monitor the outbreak. The actual games are set to begin July 23rd. Staying with Japan, the cabinet has approved a new policy that'll shape recovery efforts in areas affected by the 2011 earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear accident in the coming years. The decision came at a meeting on Tuesday as the country prepares to mark 10 years since the triple disaster.
Without the reconstruction of Fukushima, there can be no reconstruction for Tohoku. Without the reconstruction of Tohoku, Japan will never be revitalized. With this determination, the government must continue to treat the matter as a top priority.
The policy will allow the Reconstruction Agency to continue to operate until 2031. It also designates the 5 years from this April as the second phase of the recovery. It says the effort will likely cost $15 billion. The government will provide mental health support and other assistance to people living in areas affected by the quake and tsunami. It'll also work to encourage more people to relocate to areas where evacuation orders from the nuclear accident have been lifted. The government will aim to establish international research and education centers there. And the government says it'll continue to assess what to do in areas where evacuation orders remain in place. The policy also mentions radioactive water stored in giant tanks at the damaged Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. It says the government will decide how to address that problem at an appropriate time. Now, Japan's Environment Ministry says about 75% of the contaminated waste collected in Fukushima after the nuclear accident has been moved to intermediate storage facilities. Cleanup operations in the affected areas have produced a stockpile of about 14 million cubic meters of soil and vegetation. That area does not include the no-entry zone with high levels of radiation. Officials say more than 10 million cubic meters of waste have now been transported to intermediate storage facilities near the plant. The ministry plans to transfer all the waste to such facilities by March 2022. The government has said the waste will be taken out of Fukushima for final disposal by 2045. But there has so far been hardly any discussion of where or how the disposal is to be done. A survey of children who lost parents in the 2011 disaster shows more than a third do not share their feelings with others. The Tokyo-based Ashinaga organization provides educational funding and psychological support to orphans. It conducted the survey from October through November last year, and the results were released on Tuesday. Of the 310 respondents, 36.1% said they do not discuss their feelings about their parents who died or remain missing. The rate was 52.2% among junior and senior high school students. Hagiwara Sawaha is a third-year high school student in Sendai. She lost her father to the tsunami when she was 8.
There was a time when I did not talk about my father because I thought I could not cry as everyone else was sad. I was suffering alone without anyone to turn to for help.
An official with Ashinaga says a decade has not brought closure.
The children need a place where they can speak up when they want to talk about their parents.
She says the organization will continue to support the children. Media outlets in Myanmar are defying the military's attempts to block their coverage of nationwide protests against last month's coup. The military announced on Monday it was stripping 5 of their licenses. 4 of them were still providing online coverage as of Tuesday morning. They vowed to keep fighting for human rights and a return to democracy. But the CEO of one outlet fears more restraints may come soon.
They will definitely give danger to our reporters and staff in the country. That's why we closed down our offices totally in the last few weeks.
The crackdown is part of the military's move to control the flow of information in Myanmar. It's detained journalists covering the protests and warned against using the word coup. In a sign of growing unity against the coup, the AP news agency says militants from the country's Karen ethnic group were deployed to protect about 2,000 protesters near Mita in the southeast. On Monday, police in the largest city of Yangon used firearms and stun grenades on thousands of people who defied a curfew. Local media say security forces barricaded hundreds of protesters in one district overnight. Turning now to Thailand, where 3 prominent activists were denied bail as they await trial on charges of insulting the monarchy. The charges relate to a protest last September calling for royal reform. Each violation of the country's strict lèse-majesté law carries a punishment of up to 15 years. The 3 activists, along with 15 others, face additional charges including sedition and unlawful assembly. Before the hearing, one of the detained leaders said the movement is only just beginning.
In the end, no matter how many of us go to jail, there will still be people outside that are fighting. It doesn't matter if we are there or not.
4 pro-democracy activists were also detained in February for violating the lèse-majesté law. With Monday's indictment, most of the well-known protest leaders are now in custody. Next in sports, tennis star Novak Djokovic has broken Roger Federer's all-time record for most weeks spent at the top of the men's rankings. In an interview with NHK, the 33-year-old Serbian talked about his latest achievement. Djokovic won his 18th Grand Slam singles title and his 9th Australian Open crown in Melbourne last month. He topped the ATP rankings for the 311th week, surpassing Federer's record of 310 weeks.
It was always a goal, professional goal and a dream when I started playing tennis. And to stay this long there is truly remarkable, and it makes me very fulfilled and very proud. But at the same time, I'm probably not fully aware of it, and I won't be probably enjoying it too much because I guess, I'm still in the midst of a professional career, which requires for me to shift my focus onto the next challenge and the next tournament.
Djokovic said he aims to keep the position for as long as he can. And after setting the historic rankings record, Djokovic hopes to shine at another major event, the Tokyo Olympic Games.
I sincerely hope that for my own sake and sake of all the professional athletes around the world that are participating in Olympic Games, that Olympics will happen, because it's just it's the biggest sports event in the history of sport, and we want to be there, and we want to celebrate sport and represent our country.
Moving now to the weather. Spring conditions will be in full force for much of Japan the next few days. Our meteorologist Jonathan Oh has the forecast for here and elsewhere in our World Weather Report.
Hello, we're going to be dealing with warm weather as we head into Wednesday as high pressure moves in from the west and clearing out the clouds that were a big part of the story as we went through the first couple of days of this work week. We're moving from 7 to 13 degrees for a high in Tokyo, moving close to 20 as we go into Wednesday. The exception for sunny skies up toward the north. We're looking at a cold front bringing in a chance for some snow and rain into Sapporo, a high of 4 coming up on Wednesday. But look at this, 19 in Tokyo, looking at Osaka at 16 and 18 Fukuoka. So definitely seeing that warm weather, and it's going to stay around like that for at least a few days. And so hopefully you'll enjoy the warmth taking place. Speaking of warm weather, along the eastern side of the United States, high pressure is the big dominant force, and that's going to keep things relatively warm with highs moving into the 20s in many locations down to the deep south. Back toward the west, though, we do have a front that's going to be pushing over the Rockies and into the Central Plains, and that's going to bring a lot of snow and strong winds into the Rockies, and the strong winds into the plains creating some fire danger concerns. So you need to be on the lookout for that. But we'll see the rain pushing eastward as we head toward Wednesday. So places like Chicago will be picking up on some of that wet weather coming up as we head into the middle of the work week. But still seeing highs into the mid-20s from Oklahoma City into Houston. Look at this, Denver seeing snow as we go through Wednesday. Los Angeles needing some rain. We're looking at a high of 15 as we go through Wednesday. Now, before we wrap up, I want us to take a look at some video coming out of Alaska, where we have 46 teams of Huskies dashing off into the wilderness Sunday in a socially distanced start to the annual Iditarod Trail sled dog race. Weather was relatively balmy by the Alaskan standards, with temperatures rising to at least -4 degrees Celsius, the warmest start on record, and due to the pandemic, the route has been changed with a total distance of about 1,400 kilometers, 160 shorter than a traditional route. Hope you have a good day wherever you are.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said Monday that people fully vaccinated against COVID-19 can gather indoors. In Myanmar, protesters marched for a short period in Mandalay to avoid conflict with police. More than 50 people have died opposing the country's military takeover. A British-Australian expert on Islam describes her detention in Iran on spying charges as psychological torture on Australian television. And in Equatorial Guinea, the government says the number of dead from an explosion at a military base Sunday has reached 98.
Pressure mounts on Buckingham Palace to respond to the explosive interview by Prince Harry and Meghan. The father of the Duchess of Sussex says he doesn't think the royal family is racist. More violence and demonstrations on the streets of Myanmar as dozens of protesters escape after being cornered in one district overnight by security forces. The military is increasingly using the tactic of sealing off urban neighbourhoods to round up its critics. The European Parliament has voted to lift the immunity of 3 Catalan separatists. Catalonia's former leader, Carles Puigdemont, and 2 colleagues face charges of sedition in Spain over a failed bid for independence. And the beauty product giant Unilever has committed itself to greater inclusivity following complaints about its advertising. It's promised to ban excessive photo editing in advertising and to stop using the word normal.